Chapter 1 Prologue November. Get up, work, chores, sleep, repeat. This was my life. Welcome to the life of a 16-year-old boy in the 1880s. Expected to work constantly to support the family, and later find a spouse to be the breadwinner for. Despite my many protests, my father continuously kept trying to shove any possible suitors for a wife in my face. The man had high expectations for me and expected me to be married sooner rather than later. Grandchildren were wanted by both him and my mother. Impatient as they weren't too fond of the idea of me waiting to surpass the age of 20 for their fantasies to happen. They were already getting pushy about me staying in the house. No 19-year-old was supposed to be staying with their parents, according to them. Constantly, I was being reminded of how the guy down the street just got married, or how the other down the road had his second kid and pulled a good job. Being compared to them hurt me greatly, but I kept quiet and didn't say a word about my feelings. My feelings were something I hid from my family. From a young age, I learned they weren't to be listened to. As my father would say, men weren't made to complain about their feelings. They were made to work and provide for the family. With that definition in mind, I was failing as a man, miserably. My father didn't hesitate to make that known either. Over and over, I heard how I was letting him down, and as his only son. Occasionally, he would bring up my childhood and past actions as a way to get under my skin. Around my early teens, I had a sudden change in fashion. Instead of wanting to wear suits or button-ups, I leaned towards dresses. This want for a dress drove my father insane, and he beat me numerous times for it. Mum was a lot more accepting and would occasionally let me try on some of her old dresses. Never did she think that I would go any further than a curiosity, but she quickly learned how much I loved them. Wearing a dress just made me feel so much more comfortable, and I was much more out there than I would have normally been. And unfortunately, Dad found out about the dresses, and out of anger he burned them all right before my eyes. After that, talk of my desire to appear more feminine was banned unless it was used against me in an argument. In order to shut me up if we ever argued, he would send me to an asylum, as they would happily take me in for being insanely obsessed with girl things. I could have sworn the man thought I was a pervert or something. Femininity was frowned upon in men, especially by my father. He was already disappointed enough in me. Not wanting to disappoint him any further, I stayed relatively quiet and kept feelings to myself. Being feminine got me beaten one too many times, so there was no way in hell I would be admitting that I would actually want to be a woman. Dealing with the discomforts and emotions would just be something I would have to live with. Maybe in the future I'd be able to be myself, but I highly doubt people would get to be more accepting in my lifespan. Chapter 2 First Change. Welcome home! Mum gave me her usual smile when I walked through the door after a long day of work. At least I was lucky enough to work in a candy shop. Saying I had a sweet tooth was an understatement. How was work, dear? It was okay. I shrugged as I took off my coat. Getting out of that damn coat was the best part of my day. I hate that godforsaken thing. It made my shoulders look so broad and bulky. Dad always loved it for that reason. He didn't like that I was scrawny and would do anything to make me appear bulkier. That's good. Do you mind going out and help your father chop some wood? We're going to need some for the fire and stove. Do I have to? I whined. I'm tired, and you know I'm pretty much useless when it comes to chopping wood. You're never going to get good if you avoid it. Go on, go help your father. Yes, Mum, I mumbled as I put my coat back on. Oh, how I couldn't wait for the warmer months when I wouldn't need the stupid jacket to keep warm. I made my way out back, dragging my feet the whole way. Our house was fairly small, but it had a nice backyard which Dad used for wood and getting work done. He was a bit of a handyman and loved to build or fix things. I headed to the back of the house to see my old man chopping wood with one of his favorite axes that probably weighed half my body weight. Compared to my pretty short mother, the man was a giant, tall and bulky with a pretty hefty set of muscles that he earned by working on a farm. Clean-shaved face and well-kept hair, Thank God I took after my mother's side, with being smaller and having softer facial features. I was lucky enough that I didn't even have to worry about facial hair because I couldn't grow any. I even had my mother's hairstyle, just shorter, with our reddish-brown hair swooped to the side that covered part of our eye. "Ah, my boy, there you are." My dad perked up when he saw me standing there awkwardly. "Come to help your old man chop wood, eh?" I guess," I mumbled. "Well, here you go." He handed me an axe without warning and dropped it in my arms. The weight of the axe nearly pulled me to the ground. "Get to it." Sure." I tried to pick up the axe, but I could barely lift it. Unlike my dad, I was not very strong. Lifting the tool took a lot more effort than it did for him. He watched me struggle for a bit before scoffing and lifting it for me so he could rest it on my bony shoulder. Resting it there felt like having a huge boulder on my shoulder, and the weight nearly made me fall back. "Put your back into it, boy," Dad said with a less chipper tone, signifying that he was getting a tad pissed off by my lack of strength. With a fairly large grunt, I aimed at the log in front of me and swung for it, letting the axe fall naturally because of its weight. For a moment, I thought I was actually going to hit the log. The next moment, I realized that I'd completely missed and the blade was heading right for my shoes. Panic set in as the axe swung towards my feet. I couldn't help but let out a yelp as I anticipated the impact, but it never hit. "Get out of here," Dad grumbled. During the swing, he grabbed a hold of the axe and prevented it from hitting my foot. "Weakling." I had to pretend I wasn't excited to leave just so I wouldn't piss him off anymore. I rushed inside for the second time and happily took off my stupid coat. Mom saw me come inside and gave me a confused look. "I thought you were helping your father," she asked with a puzzled look. "What are you doing inside?" He told me to get out of there." He isn't in a mood again, is he?" You could say that," I mumbled as I slowly started scuttling to the stairs. "You don't need me for anything, do you?" "No, supper will be ready in 30 minutes." "All right." Quickly, I hurried up the stairs into my room. Finally, some alone time. As boring as it seems, I was happy enough to simply lay in bed and do nothing. After working and getting yelled at by my dad, being able to just do nothing was a luxury. It was the first time I was free from all nagging. No more being pestered about getting a wife or having kids. For now. After a few minutes, my dad came back inside. From my room, I could hear him grumbling about how useless I was. Hearing that did hurt, but I was pretty used to it. As I normally did, I tuned it out and let myself get lost in my thoughts, fantasizing about my life as a woman and how things would be different. Dad wouldn't get upset at me for being too weak to chop wood, and I would help Mom in the kitchen more often. Working wouldn't be mandatory, and I could have kids of my own. I could find myself a husband, and we could start a family. Imagine being a mother. Oh, I could only dream of it. "Adam!" my dad yelled from downstairs, interrupting my thoughts. God, I hate that name so much. It never felt right. "It's supper!" "Coming," I called out, a tad upset that my thoughts were interrupted. Imagining my life as the opposite gender always seemed to be appealing to me. Although I knew it would never happen, picturing it was the closest I would be able to get. Quickly, I went downstairs to join everyone at the table for supper. The smell of bread wafted through the air, signifying Mom had just made a couple of new loaves. Usually she made more than we needed so we could get some to the neighbors who weren't so well off. We weren't exactly rich, but we were definitely doing better than some of the families on the street. Dad liked to blame the fact that Mom wasn't able to have more than one kid. Most families had an average of 5 kids. Having me was hard enough for her, so she was firm on not having any other kids, so we wouldn't be without a mother. Quickly, I sat down at the table and grabbed my share of food. Boiled vegetables and a small roasted chicken sat at the table, ready for the taking. Not the fondest of meat, I mostly stuck to vegetables. Potatoes were one of my favorites, and thankfully we had plenty of them. "Take some meat, sweetie." Mom had placed an uninvited chunk of chicken on my plate. "You need the protein." "Mom," I groaned. "You need protein for those muscles. You're all bones," Dad pointed out. "You look like a dainty little girl with how thin you are." Thinking that was an insult, he expected me to pick up the meat and chow down. That wasn't the case, though. Hearing that made me more inclined to avoid the meat. Hey, if it made me look like a dainty little girl, then I was definitely okay with that. I hated my boxy figure anyway. "At least eat some of it," Mom said with a small smile. "I will," I mumbled. There was an awkward silence before Dad spoke up again. "I was talking to a work colleague, and he's got a daughter about your age," he began, She's starting to look around for possible relationships. So I set up a time for you two to meet. Dad, please. I couldn't help it. I was tired of all this marriage stuff. I just wanted to be left alone about it. I'm not looking for anyone. As much as I appreciate you looking, I'm really not interested. So you expect to stay with us rent-free? He raised his voice. When are you going to get out, And besides, a wife could do you good. Maybe you'll finally realize your place in this world. Without thinking, I rolled my eyes. Marriage, work, and kids? Was that all everyone's life was? Couldn't people just live their life alone and not have children? Don't test me, Adam. Calm down. Mom gently placed her hand on Dad's arm before he could start throwing anything. Adam, why are you so set on not finding a wife? You've talked of starting a family since you were little. And you'd make a good father. Well, maybe I don't want to be a father now, I mumbled as I picked at my food. The topic was just making me feel uneasy and too anxious to eat. The thought of being a father and having to... just no. Well, what do you want to be then? Before I could stupidly respond to the answer I would regret, Dad answered for me. A woman, Dad growled with a very unimpressed look. He seemed upset that he was unable to beat it out of me as a child. The blasted idiot wants to be a woman. We aren't stupid, Adam. Mark, please. Mum shot him a bit of a look. We talked about this. You have? I asked curiously. Well, yes. Mom nodded a bit. Clearly she was a bit uneasy talking about it. It's obvious you're not, well, like other boys. Hearing this made me perk up a bit. Were they giving me a chance? Were they finally going to accept me for who I was? Don't get too giddy, boy, Dad scowled. Just because we notice things doesn't mean we accept them. Mark, Mom shot him a glare. Despite Dad usually being the one wearing the pants in the house, Mom ruled with an iron fist when it came to me or anything in the kitchen. After glaring at Dad, she looked back at me. Your father and I talked it over the other night, and well, we decided that you are old enough and you are able to do what you want. So having said that, we're going to let you present how you want. I sat there in shock. What was I hearing? They were letting me present how I wanted? But to what extent? And did they even realize what this meant? Was Dad even okay with this? There are rules to this, Dad stated, clearly unhappy with his wife's statement. It seemed as if he hadn't expected her to bring this up. This is only for when you're at home. My name will not be tarnished by you walking around in a damn dress. And if you can help it, I don't want to see you cross-dressing. Mum rolled her eyes and looked at me. That's all he was willing to negotiate. Anyways, how does that sound? Not knowing how else to react, I just sat there in absolute shock. Adam? Mum asked me with a small chuckle. I wasn't expecting that. Sorry, I laughed a bit. Not gonna lie, I was nervous. If it was up to me, I'd dress like every other woman on my street did. My hair would be down to my shoulders, possibly longer, and I would attempt to train my voice so it was higher. Having said that, I knew this would result in mistreatment from my father. And after all these years of him hating my femininity, I knew he wouldn't be able to let this go easily. Hence why he clearly stated he didn't want to witness it. If it makes you feel uncomfortable, then you can stay. No, I'm really happy, I promise. I quickly reassured her. There was no way I was going to lose my chance. So, can I grow out my hair? Mum smiled and nodded. The complete opposite reaction to what my dad had. He scowled and glared at me, while aggressively taking a bite of his meat. Chewing was the only thing keeping him quiet. I figured that'd be a good place to start, Mum nodded. Plenty of men have long hair, so it's a good slow start. We, well, mostly your father, are going to need time to adjust. Works for me, I nodded. Growing out my hair was something that I'd wanted to do for ages, but Dad always made Mum cut it all off. There was one time where he let me grow it out a tiny bit, but it was when I was very small. But that was it. This was finally it. I could finally achieve the long hair I've wanted all these years. While Mum and I talked, Dad stayed quiet. In order to keep himself from speaking his mind, he continued shoveling food into his mouth. When he finished eating, he got up without warning and practically threw his dishes on the counter before storming outside. Most likely to chop more wood out of frustration. Sorry by him, Mum sighed. You know how much he hates this whole thing. I think the only thing I agree with is the going outside part. Only because you know how people are, and I don't want you ending up in a bad situation. Yeah, I mumbled. The whole situation made me feel pretty awful. On one hand, I love that they were letting me be myself. but knowing it was driving a wedge between Mom and Dad upset me, all because of my own gender issues. I'm sure he'll come around eventually, Mom smiled. So I've always been curious on what's going on. Like, any reason you feel this way? I don't really know, I mumbled, a bit uneasy talking about the topic. With it being taboo for so long, it was hard to speak about it. I just feel like I relate more to women than I do with men. Have you considered that you like men? Maybe that's why you don't want a wife? Not ready to talk about that, huh? I shook my head. No, definitely not. Alright, well, if you ever do want to talk, I'm here for you, okay? Mom smiled, placing her hand on mine. Hopefully this change helps you find out what you want in life. I hope. I gave her a small smile back. As excited as I was for a good change, seeing my dad's reaction stung. Knowing he would never see me the same hurt even more. It almost made me want to decline the opportunity to keep him happy. I wanted to convince myself that I could please him and be that perfect son, but after all these years, I never managed to achieve it. So maybe Mum was right. This change would help me figure out what I wanted. Chapter 3. Snake. The next day I woke up excited. It was the first day for a big change and I was ready to see how things would go. A bit disappointed that my hair hadn't grown inches overnight. I pulled myself out of bed and went to grab something to wear for the day. As much as I wanted to ask Mom for a dress to wear for the day, I fought the urges and put on my usual clothing. A white button-up with leather suspenders to help keep my work pants up. They were a size too big, and despite Mom's tailoring for me, they still never seemed to quite fit right. It was another work day, so I didn't really have a choice but to wear the outfit. Sporting a dress there would have not only gotten me fired, but also sent me to an insane asylum. Most of the people where I worked there knew I leaned towards the feminine things, and they didn't like that at all. Even at work, I had to be careful with what I said or did. Anything considered too feminine was a no-go there. So unless I suddenly had the ability to convert into a woman overnight without anyone knowing I was ever a man, then no. I'll be presenting as masculine as I can for now. A bit more energized than normal, I headed downstairs to grab a quick breakfast of some bread and butter. It was almost always my breakfast of choice. Heading to work? Mum poked her head out from the living room. Yeah, I nodded. Alright, could you pick up some sweets while you're at the shop? We just ran out of sweets for the candy bowl. Oh, yeah, I'll get those. The mint ones, right? Mm-hmm. I'll get your father to pay you back later. Okay. Oh, is the 30th still a day off? Yeah. It was the 4th of November, and unfortunately for me, I didn't have any days off until the 30th. I was supposed to have Sundays off, but Dad was making me work out in the back to gain some muscle during those days. Thankfully, the 30th was a Tuesday, so he wasn't making me work. Good to know, Mum smiled. Why? You'll have to see. She grinned like a child. I could even hear her giggling to herself. Anywho, you better get going. After glancing at the time, I realized that I was going to be late if I hung around any longer. With my breakfast in my hand, I grabbed my jacket and rushed out the door. Bye, Mom, I called as I left. When she got to respond, I was already out the door. As I munched on my bread, I wondered why Mom wanted to know my day off. Was she planning something? Surely not. She wasn't the type to surprise me. Although, having said that, she did surprise me a fair bit the night before. I ran through all the possibilities in my head, but was unable to come to a conclusion. I suppose I was going to have to wait and see. Working went how it normally did. Restock, package, and sell. That day was a particularly bad one for snotty customers. With that shop being the main candy store in town, we got customers of all classes, ages, and personalities. Don't get me wrong, most of them were kind and patient. Others, they were not. On this lucky day, part of the Hawthorne family walked in. A very well-known and respectable family. Among all the families that lived in our town, the Hawthornes were the highest of class, hence them being so well-known. Hell, they're even known in places far from where they resided. I suppose Mr. Hawthorne being a highly requested ambassador between states, that made sense. The family was quite a large one, like most families were. Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne had 8 children together. The youngest of the bunch was just a bit younger than me at 14. She was born way after the rest were. The remaining siblings were between the ages of 20 and 30. Normally, Mrs. Hawthorne would come with her youngest child and they would shop for candy, but this time it was a group of the older siblings. There was Angel, whose name fit her perfectly, with her angelic light brown hair and stunningly soft facial features. Even her body was angelic, nice hips, a bit of a pudge, and a fair height. Secondly, there was Reginald. Don't ask why his parents thought that would be a good name, because it really isn't. He was the eldest of the siblings, and like Angel, had light brown hair that was a bit shorter than mine, and looked very soft to the touch. He stood taller than I did, although thin and had a muscular look to him. Lastly, there was Beatrice. Oh, Beatrice. Picture Beatrice to be the worst person you've ever dealt with. Then multiply it by 100. The woman practically came with her own evil theme music that included thumping tubas and sinister violin screeching. Every time she walked through that door, my colleagues and I knew it would be an awful day. Some newer employees tried to be hopeful, but once they heard her screeching about how fattening candy was, they knew there was no hope. Lady, you are in a candy shop. What do you think we sell? As for looks, Beatrice stood apart from all her siblings. Most of them had light brown hair, but hers, no. It was platinum blonde and in dreads. It was so blonde that it had the potential to blind others when she stood in the sun. Thank God she almost always had a hat on when she went out, or a lot of people would be losing eyesight. Nothing about her was like her other family. While most of her family was a bit chubby, she was stick-thin, with very strong cheekbones that were sharper than a blade. It almost gave her a more edged look so people wouldn't approach her. Her siblings loved to dress in vibrant colors, but Beatrice, black. Everything had to be black or some variation of dark clothing. As the saying goes, once you go black, there ain't no coming back. The only thing that was similar between all the family members was the emerald green eyes. Luckily for Beatrice, they perfectly matched with her snake. You heard me right. The woman had a pet snake, a green mamba, to be exact. One that she named Fluffy at the ripe venomous snake-owning age of 14. I have no idea why or how her parents got it for her as a kid. My guess is that she ignored them to the point that they simply gave in. Thank God he was a gentle snake, though, because letting him roam like Beatrice did could have been dangerous. Here I go again, my coworker grumbled. How about you deal with them? I'm not in the mood. I don't want to either, I mumbled. Sadly, I didn't get a say in the matter. He scuttled out of there before I could, leaving me to deal with the customers. With an annoying groan, I went over to the group of 3. Hi, how can I help you? I asked in my best customer service voice. Apparently, offering help was a reason Beatrice saw to complain. I could just see it in her face with the way she scowled and glared at me. Your voice is awfully high for a man, she pointed out. It took almost every fiber in my body to not groan. As with most people, my voice went about an octave up when I was nervous. Not only that, but I had been consciously trying to speak in a higher voice all day. However, it didn't make much of a difference as my voice was already quite neutral sounding. Oh, sorry, I apologized. Feeling a bit pissy, I intentionally let my voice drop to an abnormally deep level for the next phrase. Is this better? The pain my voice caused my throat was well worth the look of horror on her face. Angel and Reginald got a good laugh out of it, while Beatrice went red in the face from anger. Being teased like that wasn't something she liked. You can talk in the other voice, she said, rather dismissively. Despite appearing quite irritated, she held her composure quite well. You can't tell someone what voice to talk in. Reginald raised a brow at her, clearly disapproving of his younger sister's words. Watch me, she retorted. Well, while you two argue, I'm going to get some sweets. Angel beamed. Do you have any of those twisty ones? Yep, they're just over there, I nodded while pointing to the jars on the shelf. Happily, she went over to see what was there for an assortment. Seeing her happy made me smile. It gave me the energy to turn my back to view Beatrice with a small smile. I was about to ask if she was looking for anything, but instead noticed her snake poke one of the nearby candy jars with its nose. Miss Hawthorne, I said nervously while motioning at Fluffy. You can't have your snake getting in the candy jars. Fluffy, dear, you can't have that. Beatrice pulled him away from it and let him wrap around her arm. You're already overweight. You don't need more food. Thanks, I mumbled. So can I help you with anything? Do I look like I eat candy to you? Beatrice glared. We're just here for Angel. Reginald groaned, pinching the bridge of his nose. She wants some candy, and since it's her birthday, we took her out to get some. Oh, I turned over to Angel, who wasn't too far away. Happy birthday! Birthdays aren't a reason to pig out, Beatrice grumbled. You're just upset it's not your birthday. Why in the world would I be upset about that? Who the hell wants to age? That means wrinkles. Oh, winter mint candies. Reginald perked up at the sight of them. Winter mints were one of the shop's prized possessions. They were almost always sold out. I just restocked them, I smiled. Great, I'm going to pick some up for my wife. She loves them. Right, 'cause she needs to get even fatter than she already is, Beatrice grumbled with a very sour tone. She shouldn't even be allowed to say another word, and you're not welcome to stay with us for the rest of the day, Reginald said sternly. He was stern enough that Beatrice shut up pretty quickly. It did make me wonder what she wanted out of their time together. Was there possibly bribery involved? Chapter 4. Shopping. Adam, Mom called out. Come downstairs. Coming, I grumbled. November was almost done, and the coldness of December was hitting. Despite my layers of clothing, I was still cold. Getting out from under my blankets wasn't something that I particularly wanted to do. They were the only thing keeping me somewhat warm. With a grunt, I got up and got out of bed. I ran my fingers through my hair, smiling at how much longer it felt. In less than a month, it had grown a surprising bit. It was probably about 5 inches long now, which was much better than what it used to be. Desperate to not deal with the cold much more than I had to, I rushed downstairs to see what my mother wanted. Yes, Mum? I asked tiredly, once I got downstairs. To my surprise, she was dressed up, clearly ready to head out. Normally when she dressed like that, she was going shopping. I'm heading out shopping, Mum smiled, answering my questions about where she was going. Would you like to come? Sure. Why was she even asking if I wanted to go shop? That was something she almost never asked. She wouldn't even go with Dad half the time. Let me get changed out of my night clothes. Okay. She was a bit too chipper for just shopping, but I went with it. Maybe it had something to do with why she asked if I had this day off a couple weeks ago. Cool air hit me in the face as we walked down the streets. A slight bit of a flurry was beginning to occur, giving the town a nice Christmas feel to it. Being Canadian, I did love the snow. From what I could remember from when I did live in Canada, it snowed a lot. In the States, there wasn't as much snow, though. Oh well. December was one day away, and people already had decorations up for the occasion. Even shops had them up. Personally, I didn't mind and found all the decorations quite beautiful. It gave the town a warm feeling, even though it was quite chilly. I followed my mom, hoping she would give some hint of where we were going or why she even asked me to come. So far, nothing. The only small talk was made regarding work or about the Christmas decorations that surrounded us. We headed to the edge of Main Street in town and stopped at a boutique. It wasn't one that screamed high fashion by any means. The brick exterior looked old and rigid, with bits and pieces missing from it falling apart with time. There was a window display to the side that had a naked mannequin leaning on the wall slightly. Clearly it wasn't a popular shop either. No Christmas decorations were put out, but there was a single nice big sale sign announcing the Christmas sale. It's not the nicest looking place, is it? I mumbled. The tattered look made it almost eerie and unwelcoming. Truth be told, I was hoping this wasn't where Mom wanted to go. Setting foot in there just seemed like a sketchy idea. You never know when there's someone lurking and ready to kidnap you. No, it's really not, Mom frowned a bit. But I thought it would be worth a try. Besides, they are quite a bit cheaper, and it looks like there's nobody else shopping here, which is also a bonus. Eh? Well, I wouldn't want anyone degrading you for trying on a dress, dear. Wait, so we're shopping for me? Why, of course. Mum giggled at my look of surprise. I can't be giving you all my clothes, can I? I think it's time we find something that suits your style. I gave an even bigger look of shock. But what about Dad? He's not gonna like this. Well, your father doesn't know won't kill him. I'll just tell him I went out and bought it without you, and there you go. Problem solved. He agreed to let you wear it at home, so he can't argue. Now come along now. Without hesitation, Mum walked into the shop. She seemed to be oblivious to the eerie feel of the place. Hesitantly, I followed suit. The interior looked just as tattered as the exterior. The flower-patterned wallpaper was slipping off the wall, revealing cracks and small holes in the plaster behind it. Half the flooring was missing at the edge of the boutique, too. The dresses were pretty decent quality, compared to the building at least. Mum wasted no time and started looking. Having never shopped for a dress before, I had no idea what I wanted, or what I was looking for. So I simply stood there like an idiot. There were so many choices. I didn't know where to start. How about this? Mum pulled out a dark red skirt with a loose white blouse to match. It looked absolutely stunning. I really like that, I said rather quietly, almost afraid my dad would hear me. I could also see the clerk in the shop giving me an unsettling glare from across the room. I'm trying to decide between the red or green skirt, though. Mum pulled out a green one. Or even possibly yellow. I'll try the red. Perfect. Let's see if you can try it on. As Mum went to the clerk to ask if I could try it on, I looked around a bit. Most of the attire there resembled the casual common dress that people wore. Some were obviously made for work, while others were aimed for going out. It just so happened that one of the going out ones caught my eye. It was a nicely fitted light blue blouse with a vibrant aqua skirt to match. It even came with a nicely fitted blue coat. At the bottom of the skirt and sleeve cuffs, white snowflake patterns were sewn into it to give it a wintry feel. Curiously, I felt the fabric to see if it was as comfy as it looked. It was so soft. Not only that, but it had a thin, fuzzy lining on the inside, so it would be even warmer. Do you like that one? Mum snuck up on me, nearly causing me to scream. I whipped around and gave her a nervous look. Maybe a little. Oh, you can't lie to me. I can tell when you like it more than a little. She giggled and reached for it. Oh, it's got a lining on the inside, too. Would you like to... Oh. I saw as she reached for the price tag and flipped it over. As expected, it was quite pricey compared to the first dress she had pulled for me. I'm so sorry, Adam, she sighed heavily. It's out of the budget. I'm afraid I can't afford it. It's okay. I put on a fake smile. While I did work and made money, Dad normally kept it safe for me. He let me take a small portion every now and then for something nice. Had I known we were going dress shopping, I would have stashed it up and saved for a dress, but unfortunately I spent it all on sweets. Maybe we can come back another day? Mom suggested. Maybe it'll be on sale next time. Yeah, I nodded. So, can I try on the first dress? Unfortunately, no. The clerk refuses to let you try it. So I'm thinking if you like it, I'll buy it. And then I can tailor it for you. You can even help if you like. Yeah, that's fine. I smiled. Although I loved the blue dress much more, the red one was still very nice. It was better than no dress anyway. With a smile on both of our faces, Mum purchased the dress and we hurried home so I could try it on. It had been years since I last got to try on one, and I was excited to do it again. When we got home, I wasted no time getting it on. Mum helped me get on one of her stays, then the petticoat, then the skirt and blouse. Without even seeing myself, I already felt 100 times better about myself. I felt elegant and feminine, and I was living for it. Well, it's on, Mum smiled, stepping back. What do you think? Expecting to see an elegant woman in the mirror, I eagerly looked over at my reflection. At a quick glance, I did meet that expectation, but the longer I looked, the more disappointed I felt. To put it simply, I looked like a man in a dress. Not a very tasteful look, if you asked me, or at least not on me. My hair was at an awkward length, and the stay didn't do much for my body figure. The blouse was loose around my thin arms, but tight in the shoulders. The skirt was the best looking part because, well, it's a skirt. There's not much it could offer to my figure. I look awful, I muttered. What makes you say that? I'm obviously too boxy for it. My hair is an awkward length, my shoulders are tight, and, well, I just look like a man in a dress. Those are all things we can fix, dear, Mum smiled. Do you know what I see? I stayed quiet, anticipating her answer, preparing myself for the worst. Probably even worse than my own self-criticism. I see a beautiful young woman who just needs a bit of time to bloom. You're in a bit of an awkward stage right now, which is totally okay. We all go through it. Surprised she even referred to me as a woman, I gave her a shocked look. I didn't know what to say. That was not what I was expecting at all. Now, as for the blouse and dress, I'm going to tailor it so it fits you better. Sounds good? Still a bit in shock, I nodded. With a slight giggle from my facial expression, Mum went to leave the room so she could fetch some pins to mark where she needed to fix. Right as she got to the doorway, Dad walked in, causing her to retreat a bit. I felt his eyes focus on the dress, then me. If looks could kill, I would have died many times over. I thought I made it clear I didn't want to see you dressing like that, he scowled. Take it off. You did walk into it, Mum pointed out. So that's on you. And he will be soon. I just need to pin a couple of places so I can tailor it. Why would you be tailoring it? I don't want to see my son wearing women's clothing. We came to an agreement on this, Mum hissed. Adam is allowed to present how he wishes, just not outside the house or around you if it can be helped. And if you don't want to see it, then you are welcome to leave. Dad scoffed and stormed out. While the two argued, I began tearing up. All I wanted was to be myself. Wearing feminine clothing made me feel so much better, even if I didn't like how it looked just yet. Maybe now it wouldn't look right, but I knew down the road it would. Like Mum said, I was just in an awkward phase. But Dad was determined to ruin it all. God forbid his child be different. Are you okay? Mum looked back at me with a frown. Shakily I nodded. Speaking would give away my shaky voice, and that I was on the verge of tears. Come here. Mum came over to me with her arms open, welcoming me in for a hug. I took a second before letting myself fall onto her and took the hug. He loves you, okay? We both do. He's just worried that this will get you hurt. I know the way he handles it isn't great, but I promise that we both love you, okay? No matter if you are a son or a daughter. Thanks, Mum. Chapter 5. First Binge. Seeing as it was my first dress, Mum got me to help tailor it so it would fit me better. Sewing anything definitely wasn't my strong suit, but it was fun nonetheless. It gave me a slight sense of euphoria being able to do a woman's activity. The whole time Mum and I had a bit of fun fixing the dress up. Dad sat in the living room and glared at us from a distance. Clearly he didn't approve, but he held his tongue. Once the dress was fixed, I tried it on again, and this time it fit perfectly. Unlike the previous time, I was able to look in the mirror and smile at what I saw. Yes, I still had hair on my body that looked a tad awkward, but Mum insisted that once my hair grew out a bit more, then I would pass perfectly as a woman if I wanted to. When Dad wasn't home, I happily wore my new dress around the house. The minute he got home, I would sneak upstairs and hide in my room. If I had to come out, then I would change into something he would approve of. Occasionally, he would spot me in it, and he would glare at me until I fixed it. He didn't dare say a word if Mum was around. However, if Mum wasn't around, all hell broke loose. He would berate me for wearing it and almost tried to rip it off and burn it once. Thank God Mum stepped in before he could. From those days forward, he made it his goal to turn me into the man I was meant to be. Any free time I had? Say goodbye to that. I was forced to work out back with him and do manly things. The man forgot I was virtually useless with those sorts of things, but refused to let me slack off. Every minute I wasn't around him was a minute I could be playing dress-up to him. December. Put your back into it, Dad encouraged me as he watched me attempt to chop wood. I was putting my back into it all right, by trying to not fall over. Thanks to numerous December storms, snow was piled up around my legs, making it hard to balance. My hands were freezing from being outside all day and negative degrees. And don't even get me started on my feet. I couldn't feel them at this point. No matter how many layers I had on, I couldn't keep warm, which Dad blamed on me being too skinny. I am, I whined. All I wanted to do was go in. Why couldn't I just stay inside with Mum and help her cook the big Christmas dinner? She could have used the help, not my dad. I was just slowing him down. Well, swing at it then. You've been standing there like a moron. With a whine and grunt, I swung the axe. Missing the log entirely, the axe went right into the mountain of snow next to it. You're gonna dull the axe, Dad scolded me. It's not that hard. Well, I don't have the muscles for this. Maybe if you didn't spend time playing dress-up, that wouldn't be a problem, would it, boy? Can I just go help Mum, please? Not until you split that log. Get to it. I groaned and attempted to pull the axe out of the snow. By the time I managed to do that, 10 minutes had passed, and by the time I actually split the log, an hour had passed. Finally, Dad had enough of me and told me to go inside, which I happily did. Inside the house, everything was cleaned and decorated for Christmas. Although our family wasn't huge, we had enough people coming over that Mum had her work cut out for her with dinner. As the antisocial person I wasn't looking forward to having family over. My aunts weren't bad, but my grandparents were awful to me. They hated that I wasn't with someone yet, and that I came across as feminine. At this point, they assumed I was gay and would constantly threaten to use the power of the church to convert me. You're back inside, I see, Mum said, as she chopped up some vegetables. Is your father giving you a hard time out there? Just the usual, I shrugged, trying to make me the manly man I was meant to be. Oh, yes. Well, since you're inside, why don't you help finish up supper? Yep, what do you need? Later, everyone was over, and we were all enjoying supper together. During the visit, I stayed relatively quiet. Talking to my grandparents wasn't something I liked doing, so anything other than a bit of small talk was something I avoided. Sadly, it wouldn't be very long before they focused their attention on me. They hadn't said anything yet, but I knew the comments on my hair were coming. It had grown out a fair bit since they last saw me, and it was still considered quite short, but it was the longest I've had in a while. Bangs swooped into my face, covering the majority of my left eye, and the rest stayed in pretty neat waves. Hoping I wouldn't have to deal with the comments just yet, I kept my head down and ate quietly. Maybe, just maybe, they would forget my existence. Adam, my grandmother finally focused on me, and I tried to not visibly cringe at the sound of that horrible name. She wore a stern expression, one I didn't like having directed my way. I've seen you've grown your hair out. You plan on getting it cut soon, right? Well, no, actually, I mumbled hesitantly. I was desperately trying to keep my voice lower, but after actively speaking in a higher voice for so long, it was hard to not do it out of habit. Speak up, boy, Dad demanded. He hated it when I mumbled. I'm not cutting it, I said in a more audible voice. Right away, I could see the looks on their faces from hearing the change in my voice. Your voice is higher, is it not? Grammy furrowed her brows. What's this? Are you trying to mimic a woman? No, of course not. I shook my head. Obviously, telling them was a no-go. That would be like asking for a one-way trip to the asylum. You better get acting in gear, my grandfather added. You won't be getting a wife if you look and sound like that. Grampy, I don't want a wife. You will find one. I'll be damned if you don't continue our bloodline, he exclaimed while slamming his fist on the table. And if you dare find a man, God help us all. I mumbled to myself as I looked back down at my plate. Could people just leave me alone? That's all I wanted. I didn't want to be told how to live or how I need to find a wife and have kids. Are you listening, Adam? Grammy asked sternly. Not wanting to offend her, I looked up and nodded. Good. By next year, I expect you to have found someone. This is getting ridiculous. Yes, Grammy. I wouldn't put too much pressure on him, Mum spoke up. Mark didn't even have a girlfriend until he was 21, and he only met me when he was 24. So I wouldn't worry too much. Things take time. Yes, but I want to be around to see my great-grandchildren. I'm sure you will. Grammy humphed before carrying on with insults about how useless I was. How I needed to get a better job instead of working at a stupid candy shop, and on she went. I couldn't help it, and the constant berating was making me want to cry. However, I wasn't able to do so. So what did I do? Like any normal person, I ate my feelings. If I ate, I couldn't cry, right? This wasn't something I normally did, but it seemed like a better option on that particular day. So while everyone blabbered on about how stupid I was, I kept shoving food in my mouth. Want to cry? Nope, eat more. Feeling sad? Solution, mashed potatoes. Getting too full? Well, dessert looks good, doesn't it? By the time the meal was over, I was beyond stuffed. I took over eating to a whole new level. I didn't even think it was possible to eat as much as I did. Sad thing was, it didn't even stop me from wanting to cry. My grandparents just wouldn't stop with the insults. Not being able to handle it anymore, eventually I got up and left. I waddled up to my room, clutching my poor stomach that was struggling to keep down all that I ate. After rolling into bed, I had a good cry. Everything they said really hurt. I knew I was a failure of a son. They didn't need to remind me. Why did everyone feel they had to remind me of my flaws? Was it really that hard to just accept me as a person? Or help me through it? Laying in bed alone made my mind wander. As hard as it was to admit, I really did wonder why I even stayed in this world. It just didn't seem to be worth it. I was miserable. Over and over, I wondered why couldn't I be like others? Why couldn't I be the son my dad wanted me to be, find a wife and start a family? Why me? Depression set in. It made me feel empty inside, despite my belly being full. I felt the need to fill that emptiness. Maybe more food would do it? But then again, I couldn't force down anymore. Tired, I went back and forth between getting more food or just falling asleep. While I desired more food, I ended up drifting into a deep sleep. Or a food coma, some would say. Chapter 6. Arguing. The next day I woke up feeling sluggish and sick. Definitely ate way too much. It wasn't hard to tell, with the obvious bloating that was still lingering. Grateful that I didn't have to work that day, I curled up even more under my blankets. It was too cold outside the blankets to leave bed just yet. Slowly I started to drift off into a light sleep. Just minutes before unconsciousness, my body suddenly decided that, nope, not sleeping, and instead, I would be puking. Without any warning, I hurled over the edge of my bed and puked. As puking normally was, it was an unpleasant experience. Nobody particularly likes having undigested food and stomach acid run up their throats. Instead of a quick round of it, my body prolonged it, making me hork up small bits and pieces here and there. Adam! Mum must have heard me puking and come upstairs to see what was going on. Oh dear, let me get the bucket. Quickly, she ran off to grab what we called the puke bucket. I'd say the name explains it. Before I could ruin the flooring any more than I already had, she ran in with the bucket and placed it in front of me. Groggily, I sat up and cradled it in front of me, leaning forward a bit, anticipating the next round. Mum wasted no time in cleaning up the mess. She did so quietly, and only once she cleaned it up did she sit beside me and talk to me. Are you feeling any better? She asked gently as she rubbed my back. I shook my head no. There was still more to come up. I could just feel it. Or as I thought that, I puked even more. Mum sighed. You probably ate too much last night. Your father and I noticed how much more you ate than compared to normal. I just groaned in response. Was there a reason for that? We found it quite odd. Grandparents, I coughed. I was upset. Oh, yeah, they really went at you. I don't blame you for feeling upset and emotionally eating. How about you rest up, okay? Tiredly, I nodded and slid down onto my back more, finding comfort in my pillows. If you ever need to talk, I'm here. Mum smiled as she moved my hair out of my face. Rest up. Quietly, she left me there with my new best friend, the puke bucket. As she closed the door behind her, I could hear Dad approach and the two talk. Is he sick? I heard Dad ask. He was most likely asking because he needed me for more wood chopping. Yeah, I think he ate too much last night, and it's coming back up, Mum sighed. Best to let him rest for the day. He better be good to go tomorrow. He's got work. Oh, I don't think it'll be any worry. I'm sure he'll be good to go by tomorrow for sure. Good. Maybe he can think about what his grandparents told him yesterday. Dear, they were downright rude to him. Who would want to think about that? They were right about getting married and having kids, though, and how useless he is as a man. Well, maybe he's useless as a man because she's a woman. Hearing that made me smile. I couldn't help it. Nobody used the female pronoun for me. That was the first time, and I loved it. It almost made me do a little dance. I'll admit, it was a bit awkward, too. Never hearing people use she for me was obviously going to make it a bit strange. Still, I loved it. Oh, now you're calling him she, Dad said in a bit of a growl. Did he ask you to do that? No, but I'm smart enough to be able to tell what she wants, Mum said. Hearing that made me smile even more. The amount of euphoria I was getting at that moment was unbelievable, and almost made me feel instantly better. In fact, I'll talk to her tomorrow, and if she wants me to, I'll start referring to her as a woman from now on. He is a man. Nothing he does will change that, Matilda. Nothing. With that, I heard him storm down the stairs and out of the house, presumably to chop more wood. Gotta love winter and that constant need for wood to burn. Always gives a way to let out your anger. By next morning, I had nearly forgotten that Mum was planning on talking to me. I was pretty out of it when I heard them discuss my gender, so not everything stuck. All I really remembered was the euphoria. Without much thought, I got up and prepared for work like usual. I was definitely feeling much better than the day before. No feelings of being sick, nor bloating. As usual, I headed downstairs to grab my usual breakfast of bread and butter. Oddly enough, I found Mum sitting at the dining table, seemingly waiting for me. Morning, I said as I went to grab my breakfast. Morning, she smiled. You feeling any better? Yeah. That's good. Do you mind sitting at the table for a moment? I want to ask something. Sure. Quickly, I buttered the bread, popped it in my mouth to hold while I closed the bag it was in, and sat down at the table. So I was talking with your father yesterday, and the topic of gender was brought up, she explained. Obviously, we disagreed on a couple of things. Don't worry, I said. I heard the conversation. You guys weren't exactly quiet. Oh, well, I guess you know what I'm going to ask then. Mm-hmm, I nodded. If I want to be referred to as a man or a woman? Yes, exactly. Well, I know it's not possible around the family or outside, but I would prefer being referred to as a woman. Hearing you call me a woman last night, I don't know, it just made me so happy. It's hard to explain. If it's what you want, then I'll do it. I want you to be happy, and truth be told, I've always wanted a daughter, and it's nice to know I've always had one. I couldn't help but smile. Thanks, Mom. You're the best, honestly. Oh, why, thank you. Mom pretended to be all that before returning to her normal body language. On that note, I have something else for you. You do? Mm-hmm. She pulled out a big box that somehow she had secretly hidden under the table. It's a late Christmas present. I didn't want you opening it with your father around because, well, you see. Excitedly, I popped open the lid. What I saw made me gasp. You didn't, I said in shock. I pulled out the brilliant blue winter-themed dress that I couldn't take my eyes off of at the boutique. I did, she beamed. I kept an eye on it, and when it came on sale, I went and got it right away. My gosh, Mom, you shouldn't have, honestly. But I had to. I wish I could try it on now. I marveled at it. A bit sad that I couldn't wear it then. I placed it gently back in the box. When I get home, putting this thing on is the first thing I'm doing. And I'll be here waiting to see your happy little face when you do. Happily, I got up and gave my mother a big hug. Honestly, I didn't deserve her. She was too good for me. All day I counted the minutes until I could go home and put on the absolutely stunning dress. I just couldn't wait. Picturing myself as a wintry princess made me smile. While I knew I might not be able to look like that, I knew I could definitely feel like it. With my boost of mood, dealing with customers was actually fun. I would chat with them and confidently point them in the right direction. Even my coworkers noticed my boost and were curious why I was so happy. As much as I wanted to share why, I knew I couldn't share that news. It did upset me a bit, but nevertheless, I wasn't about to let it get me down. The moment I was released from the iron grips of my work hours, I rushed home, running faster than I ever thought I could run. Excitement ran through my veins as I pictured how magnificent I would feel in that beautiful dress, not to mention how warm it would be too. Took me a total of 2 seconds to yoink that dress out of its box once I got home. Impatient as I was at that moment, I barely had the dress half on by the time Mom came to help. Finally, I would be able to wear what I considered my dream dress. When it was on, I took a deep breath and looked in the mirror. Unlike my first one, it fit a lot better, surprisingly. Mum must have tailored it beforehand. The shoulders fit perfectly, while my sleeves remained a tad loose. The collar of the blouse hid my cursed Adam's apple perfectly, and the skirt, oh my gosh, it was stunning. I still couldn't get over the detail put into the bottom stitching. Wow, even Mum looked surprised. You look gorgeous. I feel it too, I beamed. You know what? I'm wearing this for the rest of the night. It's too comfortable to get out of. I don't blame you, Mum giggled. The lining on it looks quite warm. Oh, it is. I wore that dress for the remainder of the evening. One giant cloth made all the difference and gave me more self-confidence than I've had in a very long time. It made me feel like nothing could stop me. Well, except my dad. When he saw it, he flipped his shit. Nearly flipped the table too. Seeing it irritated him immensely. Realizing my mistake of wearing it around him, I backed off rather quickly. Before he could actually flip the dining table, I ran upstairs to my room and hid. From there I could hear Mum get upset with him, but it sounded like Dad had enough. I want that dress burned, he demanded. No man should be wearing such a thing. She's a woman and she looks perfectly fine. Matilda, I don't know what world you're living in, but he looks like a clown. She does not. And if you would just because you want a daughter doesn't mean you can turn our son into one. What he said shocked not only me, but I imagine my mother as well. There was a silence before I heard Dad storm out of the house, slamming the door loudly behind him, and Mum beginning to sob. I knew I was the problem. I quickly changed out of the dress and into clothing Dad would approve of. Although the moment I had with the dress was magnificent, I wasn't sure it would be happening again. Not with Dad around anyway. Fearing he would actually burn it, I hid it in my closet so he wouldn't find it. Then I headed downstairs to check on my mother. I found her sitting on the couch, sobbing. Clearly what Dad said had really upset her. "Are you okay?" I asked quietly as I sat next to her. Comforting people wasn't my strong suit and all, and instead of creating a more comfortable atmosphere, I created a more awkward one. I'll be okay," Mum nodded and wiped her tears. With a small, sad smile, she looked at me. "I'm sorry he got upset with you like that." "It's okay. About what he said earlier to you? I swear all this, gender stuff, it isn't your fault. I promise." "I know. You've been like this since you were an infant. I guess I'm just a bit surprised." "Yeah, I am too." "I would suggest being more careful around him for a bit," Mum sighed. "Wait for him to adjust, okay?" "Okay," I nodded, a bit sad that I wouldn't be able to have as much freedom as before. There was a bit of awkward silence before I instinctively gave her a hug. I really did feel bad about being the cause of everything. First it was Dad always getting upset, now it's causing a rift between my parents. Handling it was really hard. It made that emptiness that I felt not too long ago begin to come back, along with the depression to fill it. Thinking I could simply numb it with a small snack was where I messed up. A simple slice of bread with butter turned into a whole mess. Chapter 7. Cycles. It was almost as if I blinked out. One minute I was aware of my surroundings, and the next I was on the floor, sobbing in pain. Once again, I ate way too much, and I wasn't really sure why. It made no sense to me. Clearly it wasn't helping fill the void that I felt, but why did I do it again? Not only that, but it made me really sick last time. I didn't want to go through that again, but somehow over and over I found myself in the exact scenario. Something upsetting would occur, and I immediately would try to solve it with food. Sad thing was, it never worked half the time. Instead, it just made me feel sick. More often than not, I would eat food to the point where I would end up being sick, and then keep eating. I'm not sure where this coping mechanism came from, but it quickly became a really bad habit that I was deeply ashamed of. Believe me, I wanted to stop, but at the same time, it seemed nearly impossible. With the ongoing tension between my parents and me not only being in the middle of it, but the cause of it, I just needed something to cope. I tried other things, I really did. From art to knitting to sport. But nothing could ever distract me enough to prevent the inevitable binge. It was to the point where I was binging at least 3 or 4 times a week, and I felt horrible about it. My parents often wondered where the food went or why I never seemed to have any spare change. Why? Because I couldn't stop myself from stuffing my face with hopes of solving my sadness. The other downside to this was weight gain. Unfortunately, eating more equals weight gain, which was a rule I wasn't exempt from. As someone who was a stick all of their life, it was quite noticeable too, especially with how fast it was happening. Within a couple months, none of my men's clothing fit anymore. Those work pants that were always too loose on me no longer fit me in the slightest. Mum had spent Dad's hard-earned money to get me new ones. Thankfully, with how the dresses were made, everything depended on how tightly you tied it, so it was going to take a much bigger difference to outgrow those. Everything was happening so rapidly that I could barely recognize myself anymore. Associating myself with my body just didn't work anymore, and there was a huge disconnect. Even bigger than before, when all that disconnected me was gender. I just didn't look like me anymore when my face was filled out and my body was noticeably whiter. Thankfully, I wasn't like Dad and collected all my weight in the upper body. It was pretty evenly distributed, allowing me to still feel like I had a chance at passing as a woman. Though out of all the bad things that were happening, one good thing came out of it. It sounds incredibly dumb, but with the weight gain, I looked like I had breasts. Albeit small, but still breasts. Out of everything, that was the only thing I actually liked, which made it even harder to let go of my dangerous coping mechanism. Obviously, if I did lose weight, then all the signs of a chest would be gone. I wasn't sure I could let that go. At the same time, I knew that what I was doing was horrendous for my health, and eating myself to death wasn't exactly how I wanted to go. As mentioned earlier, it was noticeable. That means the family definitely noticed. At first, Dad was all for me, looking like a man. He never liked how skinny I was in the first place. Over time, that feeling faded, and he started seeing me as useless and fat. On the other side of things, Mom was very concerned. Packing on as much weight as I did in such a small time period was worrying, so I understood where she was coming from. Truth be told, I was worried too. Countless times Mum tried to get me to talk, but I was too ashamed to admit anything. If anything, it made me feel even guiltier that I was worrying her, making me more prone to do what made me feel guilty in the first place. It was just one big, incomprehensible cycle. Chapter 8. Mistakes. July. Summer finally came and I had just turned 17. Normally I looked forward to not having to wear that stupid coat Dad loved, but this year I would have killed to hide in it, let alone fit in it. All I wanted to do was hide away and be left alone. I could live with people seeing the damage I was doing to my body, but I hated the comments. People felt the need to point it out as if I didn't already know what my body looked like. Like, yes, Beatrice, I get it. I'm fat. Now, did you come here to buy candy or to berate me? Work became the worst part of my day. Being around people was the exact opposite of what I wanted. At least my coworkers noticed my discomfort and would let me work in the back most of the time, especially if a customer was being particularly rude. Most people were kind enough and never mentioned it, but certain ones, more specifically returning ones, weren't so nice. We had a lot of returning customers who remained loyal to the business since before I began working there. They would see the changes and scoff about it. I suppose none of them particularly liked me much anyway, so I was just giving them more to hate on. Literally. With the increasing summer heat, I was no longer able to hide in my many layers of clothing without sweating a whole river. I would have saved up to buy myself some baggy summer clothing, but I spent all my spare money on Binge food as a desperate attempt to not eat what Mom bought. At the very least, I wanted to make sure that my addiction wasn't affecting everyone else in the family too much financially. Unfortunately, it didn't always work out like that. "Adam!" Dad bellowed at the bottom of the staircase. I was hiding in my room, trying to figure out how to knit a sweater. Maybe I could knit one big enough to forever hide in. "Come downstairs!" With a groan, I got up and left my bedroom for once. Of course I couldn't leave without my blanket wrapped around me. I didn't care that it was humid in the house or that I was already sweating. Body image issues and my hate of looking like a man bothered me way too much. You need something?" I asked tiredly as I walked down the stairs. He stood at the bottom, looking quite upset. Oh God, what'd I do now? "Mind explaining where the leftovers from last night went?" he growled. "They were supposed to be for my lunch." It took me a second to rattle my brain enough to realize what I did. Blanking out during binges was something I commonly did as a method of blocking the pain out. It wasn't intentional by any means. However, I could normally remember where I had gotten the food from. Last night I was pretty desperate and went for what was in the house, which included the leftovers. Ashamed, I looked down and felt my face burn up. I'm sorry. "No wonder you're so damn fat," Dad yelled, catching Mom's attention from the kitchen. Because of my stupid, uncontrollable actions, she had an extra job on her hands now. "You just eat anything that's available without thinking of others. What the hell's wrong with you?" "Mark, please. I'm sure Mom butted in. She could see that I was very clearly upset and ashamed. "He! For the last time, Matilda, he's a man!" Unable to handle it anymore, I turned around and ran back upstairs into my room. "Don't you run away from this!" Dad screamed. My heart dropped as I heard him stomp up the stairs with a loud thud. 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 "It's time you deal with your actions and face the consequences." With a loud BAM, he swung open my door with such force that it slammed into the wall it was hinged onto. Shaking with fear, I sat there on my bed, huddled in my blanket. I didn't know what to do. Who would have thought he'd get so defensive over leftovers? Blinded by anger, he grabbed one of my nearby belts that rested on the hooks on the wall and threatened to hit me with it. This wasn't an uncommon punishment, but it was still scary. "That shit hurts!" Before he could give me a good smacking, Mom ran in and convinced him to leave me alone for the time being. She talked him into leaving the room and eventually managed to calm him down. Mom had a way with words, and if she was level-headed, calming someone wasn't that hard for her. Knowing I would be upset, she left me alone for a bit. Time to myself was definitely not what I needed, though. Dad's words repeated in my head, especially the one about being fat and not caring about others. He made me question how much worse things had gotten. Had I gained even more weight? Was I eating more than I normally did in a binge? Was I unconsciously binging more than I was aware of? Question after question kept popping up, leading to irrational decisions. See, I always told myself that I could deal with my weight as long as I still fit in that magnificent blue dress. If it got to the point where it no longer fit, then I promised myself I would change. So as an attempt to tell myself I was okay, I grabbed that precious dress and attempted to put it on. Horrible logic, I know. When I say my heart sank when I was unable to tie the petticoat, I meant it sunk. Tears began welling up in my eyes as I came to the realization of how badly I let myself go. Hopeful that I just messed up, I tried again. Sadly, I couldn't get the damn strings around my waist enough to tie them. Absolutely destroyed, I quickly took it off and threw myself into bed. I broke out into tears. Part of me wanted to do something about it, as I promised myself, but the other part wanted me to give up and eat my feelings. How much longer would I keep doing this? I couldn't keep doing it. Dad was getting more and more upset with me, and I was worrying Mom to no end. Eventually, I was going to have to stop or ask for help. But when would I? It took me hours to stop crying. It took me an extra hour to finally get up out of bed. This time with a new motivation. After running through my options many times over, I finally decided I would change. This was it, the turnaround point. To make up for the previous day's binge, I would walk it off. I made a plan that I hoped would work. The plan was to hold off eating for as long as I could and made sure I exercised throughout the day. In my imagination, I would be able to hold off until supper and eat a fair amount that I burned off with exercise. A perfect plan, right? Apparently I was just full of bright ideas. The exercise thing? Yeah. Instead I caused myself another spiral. Now on top of binging, I had a habit of trying to burn it all off by exercising. It would look a bit like this. Begin to eat, realize what I'm doing, panic and exercise to no end, come home feeling starved, and finally, binge. Skipping meals before supper probably wasn't helping the situation either. No matter what I tried, I just couldn't seem to take control of anything. All control in my life was slipping out of my hands, and it was only about to get worse. One hot summer day, I was doing the usual work shift at the shop. Unfortunately, it was one of those days where I had to be in the front to help customers. Thanks to my stupid decisions from the night prior, my legs were aching horribly. Every step I took felt heavy and painful. That's what you get for walking 10 kilometers, I guess. To add to things, I was exhausted from lack of sleep. Binging caused me endless hours of puking last night, resulting in no sleep. I felt pretty sick to my stomach, but I had to work. "Doing okay, Adam?" my coworker asked with a look of concern as he passed me. "You look like you're going to be sick." "Oh, I'll be fine," I sighed. "I just hope there aren't any fussy customers." "Don't we all?" "Look, are you sure you're okay? There's nothing going on at home or something you're dealing with? A lot of us are worried about you right now." "As I said, I'll be okay," I nodded. "I just got a bit of the flu." "Awfully long flu, but if you say so." I smiled awkwardly. Situations like that were always so awkward. With a sigh, I looked around to see if anyone had shown up yet. So far, nothing. Maybe it wouldn't be a busy day? That would be amazing, honestly. I could sit at the front desk, sneak in a couple of naps, and maybe feel a bit better. Right as I began fantasizing about the naps I desperately wanted, the bell at the front door rang, signifying someone walked in. With a small groan and an eye roll, I peeked over the shelves and saw none other than Beatrice and Angel. Oh God, please no, not today. "Hello," Beatrice announced with a rather whiny and pissed off tone. I could almost hear that fitting theme music begin to play in the background, with the sinister violins screeching about my doom. With every step she took, I could hear a tuba thumping to the beat. "Hey," I gulped as I stepped out from behind an aisle. I was literally praying that this would be a quick business and Beatrice would stay quiet. Heck, I even tried to lower my voice for her. How can I help you?" The look of horror on her face when she saw me was indescribable. Her eyes darted to my hair that was now shoulder length, then my body, then back to my hair, then to my tired eyes. Emerald green snake eyes pierced through my soul, making me regret my whole existence. You're that boy from last time," Her voice had gone high-pitched from disgust, but also had a slight cackle. Believe it or not, Beatrice hadn't been in the shop since November. Candy wasn't something she was interested in. It was usually her siblings who dragged her along against her will. Basically, this meant she saw all the changes to me and my body in their full glory. Yeah? Can I help you? Getting out of my sight would be a good start. Beatrice made a shoe motion with her hand while her nose went in the air. Can someone who doesn't look like they've been stuffing their face all year come and help me? Well, my sister actually. I don't eat candy, but you get the point. Beatrice! Angel shot her a glare. This young man was kind enough to offer help, and that's how you treat him? That's out of character even for you. Well, look at him. Beatrice leaned closer to her sister, trying to seem secretive. I could hear her perfectly. He's obviously a Either that or the hair gives it away. One more word out of you and I'll make sure Mom and Dad don't pay for that maid of yours. Angel scowled at her before turning to me with a softer expression, clearly very apologetic. I'm terribly sorry for her behavior. I really am. It's okay, I sighed. This wasn't what I wanted to deal with that day. Hearing it all made me feel sick to my stomach again. So, I'm looking for peppermints, Angel said. Where could I find those? Right over here. I pointed to the nearby display. She smiled and headed over, dragging a very upset sister with her. Thank you. The whole time she browsed what she was looking for, Beatrice kept shooting me death glares. Occasionally her sister would notice and tell her to stop, but like a child, she continued to do so with the utmost composure. Finally, she found what she was looking for. All I had to do was ring her up at the cash register and they could leave. Seemed easy enough, until I felt a familiar feeling rush over my body. Lightheadedness and weak knees along with a nice touch of shakiness. The warning signs hit me too late, with no time to react. I leaned over and puked. Ever so lucky for me, Beatrice happened to be close enough that a small bit splattered on her dress. Or at least she thought some of it did, which was just as bad. That's when all hell broke loose. You absolute pig! Beatrice shrieked. How dare you let your grossness splatter on my beautiful dress? This dress is more expensive than all of your belongings put together. Oh, shush. Angel rolled her eyes, coming to my aid. Gently, she helped me down to the floor since I was struggling to stand and grabbed the nearby trash can for me. You're imagining things. None of it got on your dress. Why are you helping him? Because unlike you, I have a heart. And if it bothers you so much, then step outside and wait for me. Listen here, Beatrice set her glare on me, giving me the chills. I will have you fired for this, so don't expect to hold on to your pathetic job for much longer. With that, she stormed out, loudly complaining about how she was going to have to bleach her dress to make sure none of my germs got on her. Angel sighed and gave me a sad look. I'm sorry about her. Is there a coworker who can help you? They're out back, I mumbled as I hung my head over the trash bin. Luckily for me, they heard all the screeching, and right as I finished my sentence, they also came out to see who was causing the commotion. They saw me on the ground and ran over right away. You okay? Did you really puke on Beatrice? One mumbled. Who knew you had such guts like that, Adam? I'll be okay, I mumbled, clearly out of it. I think you ought to head home, Angel said. I'm sure they don't want you making others sick, right? My co-workers nodded in agreement. Come on, I'll help you up, and we'll get your stuff. Thanks, I mumbled. Sadly, my greatest worry wasn't the sickness I felt. It was the probability of me losing my job. Chapter 9. Caught. 2 days later, I lost my job. That absolute snake of a woman complained enough that my manager fired me. No doubt bribery was also involved. Who wouldn't say no to a bit of extra cash for firing an employee? Especially from such a rich woman who nobody wanted to be on the bad side of. Hearing the news made my mother furious at Beatrice, and my father became infuriated with me. Apparently, it was my fault in his narrow mind. Seeing the other side of things was impossible for him. Over and over, he yelled at me, telling me I was nothing but a useless piece of shit who took everything for granted. Mum tried to stop him, but even she couldn't calm him down from his raging. The toll this took on my well-being could have damn near killed me. Binges became more severe, and I began taking money from my savings to fulfill them. On top of that, I was attempting to exercise everything off. All day I would be out walking or running, only to come home and binge after getting yelled at again. I mean, it was kind of working with my weight. Somehow I had actually dropped a fair bit of weight, leading me to be in the slightly overweight category instead of obese. Progress? I guess. It didn't stop me from looking horribly ill, though. But I suppose that couldn't be helped when my routine was messing up my body. Day after day, I repeated the same cycle. I was unable to get out of it, and I didn't know why. All I wanted to do was stop. It was causing me too much physical and emotional anguish. I was also picking up on a new habit. One that seemed to be a form of gaslighting myself. Instead of cowering around my dad, I would look for a fight. With all these emotions I didn't know what to do with, it seemed like a fair way to get out my anger. So I would proudly sport all the dresses I had around him. Not gonna lie, it did feel good knowing that I was able to fit into them again without much of an issue. It also felt good to feel like I was presenting as a woman. I didn't have to be anywhere now, so why not be the person I wanted to be? Every time Dad walked by, he would scowl and mutter something rude. He hated my new attitude. A few times he threatened to burn my dresses, but I would threaten to walk around naked if he did so. As a woman, I wasn't wearing men's clothing. He seemed to understand that I meant what I said, and thankfully, never did it. Poor Mum was caught in the middle of it all. While she loved that I was finally standing up for myself, she found it difficult watching Dad and I fight constantly. Torn between everything, she just stayed out of it unless it got physical. "Adam," Mum called from the kitchen. "Do you want to come with me to the park? It's a nice day for a walk." "Yeah, sure," I nodded. Walking sounded great. I was already planning on going anyway. Tiredly, I pulled myself up from the couch to go up to my room and change. My legs were still hurting from my previous day's walk, but it wasn't anything I couldn't handle. "Oh, you should be okay out there in the dress." Mum stopped me before I went upstairs. "There's almost never anyone at the park, and I think with a nice hat, you shouldn't be questioned." "You think so?" "Mm-hmm. With the hat, you look like a replica of me, and I look like a woman. I think." "You do," I laughed. As scary as it was, I wanted to go out presenting as a woman. I figured that if I stayed quiet around passerby people, then I wouldn't give it away with my voice. Even though I've been working on it, my voice was still barely passable. Being out in the park and presenting as a woman was nerve-wracking, but exciting at the same time. Euphoria filled my veins every time a passerby would greet us with a "good afternoon, ladies," or simply pass by without a second glance. Did I really pass? Could what I saw in the mirror be wrong? From my perspective, I looked like a man. Despite my facial features being soft, they were still masculine in my opinion, especially my jawline. But being out that day gave me so much validation. "So, how are you doing?" Mom asked to start some small talk. "Okay, I guess." "I guess?" "I don't know, my legs hurt." "Would that happen to be related to why you're usually gone all afternoon?" "Maybe," I mumbled. I almost never told Mom what I did when I went out. If she knew, she wouldn't let me leave. "Adam," Mom said in a stern tone. "Honey, I'm worried about you. You disappear for the whole afternoon and come back looking exhausted, and then you hide away in your room." I've been trying to get out more, that's all. Despite wanting to open up and just spill it all, I couldn't. Giving up what made me feel safe just wasn't something I could do. "You sure? I can't help but feel like you're exercising a bunch to try and make up for what you eat. Don't think I'm dumb. I know you've been eating a lot more lately." "So I want to lose weight," I shrugged. "It's no big deal." "It is if you're hurting yourself in the process," Mum frowned. "I don't want to see you go through some big health scare." "I won't," I said. "I've got things under control, okay?" "All right," Mum sighed. "I'm always here to talk if you need me, especially if you need help. I'll always be there for you." "Thanks. On another note, any luck finding another job?" "I tried a couple of places, but I guess the snake lady spread the word and has made it her goal to make sure I don't get a job." "That damn bitch," Mum grumbled. "If I could slap her, I would. Nobody messes with my daughter like that." "Maybe I won't have to work if I find a husband," I said without thinking at all. Never had I admitted to Mum that I was attracted to men. "Ooh, I was right!" Mum's reaction was unexpected. She seemed to have found it cute. "My little girl wants a husband, I knew it!" "You knew?" "Well, of course. You don't hide it very well. Even as a kid, when you expressed your want for a family, you always took on a motherly role while the other was a man." "Oh, well, too bad no man wants to marry someone like me." "You never know." "Fat chance," I laughed. As if someone would ever love me. Nobody wants a fat man who thinks he's a woman. Later that night, I fell into the same routine. Dad and I got into an argument yet again, and I found myself leaning on my usual crutch, food. After dinner, I headed out to the shop and spent a big chunk of money on food to binge on. Buying all of it made me feel incredibly guilty, but I was also too irrational to care. Once I was home, I wasted no time and dug into the collection of food I bought. After I finished the first half, I ended up puking in the trash can. Despite doing this for so long, I really didn't have the capacity to eat that much, and after a while, I always ended up hurling. Of course, that didn't stop me from continuing on. Unbeknownst to me, Mum was just behind my partially open door. The door was open just enough that if anyone was curious, they would be able to look through the crack and see what I was doing. Unfortunately, it never really closed all the way, so I was used to it being slightly open, even when I want privacy. Determined to get to the bottom of things, she had been keeping a very close eye on me. Already having witnessed me bring my bag of purchased food into the house, she knew something was up. Unfortunately for her, she looked at the wrong time. She watched in horror as I forced down too much at a ridiculous speed and puked it up unintentionally, and then continued eating. Witnessing it made her tear up. Seeing her daughter go through such a thing hurt her immensely. "Adam." I jolted at the sound of her voice. Terrified and ashamed, I whipped around and saw Mum standing next to my bed. How'd she get there without me hearing her? Our eyes met, and I nearly broke into tears when I saw the pain in her eyes. Quietly, she knelt down and sat next to me. My usual placement for binging was behind my bed. I would sit on the floor, facing the wall, and lay out all the food on my bed or on the floor. After seeing the pain in her eyes, I looked away and kept my eyes focused on the floor. "Mind explaining what's going on?" Mum asked gently. I stayed quiet. "What's all this food for?" I don't want to talk about it. I was on the verge of tears. Being caught in the act made me even more ashamed. "I know, dear." Mum placed her hand on my back and played with my hair a bit. "But I think it's time you did. Surely this is causing you a lot of emotional distress." It hurts." Unable to stop myself, I curled up in a ball, clutching my horribly bloated stomach. "What does, dear?" "Everything. My stomach, the things Dad says, the lack of control, everything." "Come here." Mum sighed as she pulled me close for a hug. "Like I've been saying, I'm here to help, okay? We're going to get through this, I promise." "I can't stop," I sobbed. "I've tried, but I can't do it." "You can. It'll just take time, and I'll be here every step of the way." I didn't know what to feel. Guilt was definitely there, but hope and relief kept coming up. Help was something I had been wanting for ages. Stopping this horrible cycle was all I ever wanted. At the same time, fear was beginning to set in. Ending the cycle meant having to give up my only coping mechanism. I wasn't sure how I would be able to deal with that. Would I fall into something else? The whole situation was causing a mess of emotions, causing me to feel the need to eat more. Desperate to numb the feelings, I reached for a nearby package of food. "Oh, Adam, I don't think that's a good idea." Mum snatched it before I could get my grubby little hands on it. "I saw how you puked earlier. You've probably already eaten too much." "But how about you work on knitting your sweater as a distraction? I'll clean all this up and then join you so you're not alone, okay?" I sighed before nodding. "Okay. All right. We're gonna get through this." Chapter 10. Final Straw. For once I was kept distracted from the binging urges. My goddess of a mother sat with me right until I dozed off. The next morning, she was right there to make sure I was alright too. In order to keep things under control, she laid down some rules. Rule 1. Buying food was a no-no. Unless she was there to keep an eye on me, I wouldn't have access to my money. Was I upset to hear that? Oh yeah. Knowing my way of getting food was gone made me very upset, and a little more hostile towards her. Unintentionally, though. Rule 2. She was to keep an eye on me at all meal times, or if I had food around me. I guess she didn't trust that I could control myself around it. She promised that she would lessen the amount of time she was watching over me once things started to look up, but for now, I was stuck with her watching my every move. Adding to that rule, I learned that she would be watching not only how much I ate, but the pace of which I did. Too fast? She would tell me to slow down. Too slow? She would tell me that she's not letting me skip the meal. Skipping meals was another thing I was not allowed. She knew the outcome of it would only be me feeling so hungry that I wouldn't be able to stop myself. Lastly, Rule 3. No going out to exercise all day. In fact, she was limiting my exercise as a whole for some reason. That I couldn't understand. Clearly, I needed it. She was pretty adamant about being strict on that one. However, she did promise a 30-minute walk every day if I cooperated. That gave me a small motivation. Although I didn't love exercise, I knew I would feel better getting some. The first few days of having these rules set down was rough, to say the least. All I thought about was food. Constantly. How could I possibly sneak a binge? How was I going to cope? What was I going to do with myself? I didn't realize how addicted I was to the habit. Was I really this bad? Stressed out by everything, I was starting to get very irritated. Last night, all I wanted was to stop this habit. Now, all I wanted was to be allowed to indulge in the habit. Adam, Mum quickly checked on me from the living room. With nothing to do, I was simply laying on the sofa and attempting to find some motivation to knit something. Are you doing okay, dear? Just fine, I grumbled. The tone caused Mom to pause and give me a look. You don't sound it with that tone, she frowned. Do you want to talk about it? No. Are you sure? I glared at her in response. All right, she sighed. How about you come help me with the laundry? Maybe it'll help take your mind off things. Doubt it, I mumbled as I pulled myself up from the sofa. Already irritated, I just held my tongue and did what she wanted. Together we washed and dried laundry for everyone in the house. During that time, only food occupied my mind. Thoughts of sweets and pastries crossed my mind constantly. Oh, what I would have given to have one and just feel emotionally better, even if it was just a little. Mum tried to hold a conversation, but quickly realized it would be pointless. I wasn't in the mood to talk. Later, the family had supper as usual. Despite wanting to have an outburst at the ridiculous portion on my plate, I bit my tongue even more. It was a wonder I hadn't bitten through my tongue yet. Emotional and hungry, I dug in. I knew the moment wouldn't last long, but finally, I had my emotional crutch back. Slow down, Adam. Mum placed her hand on my arm and gave me a concerned look. It took everything in my power to not tell her off. Instead, I slowly pushed the plate away for a moment. Having it further away from me made it easier to not go right back into speed eating. I looked up to see Dad giving me a weird look. I returned it with a very frustrated and sulky expression. What's that look for? He raised an eyebrow. Nothing, I grumbled. Dad didn't actually know what was going on. Mum and I agreed not to tell him as we knew he wouldn't handle it well. Gender was already an issue. Binging didn't need to be added to the list of reasons he hates me. After counting down about 60 seconds, I pulled the plate back and started eating again. At first, I was normal paced. Then the speed increased once again. I was told to slow down. With a loud groan, I pushed the plate back again. This kept happening over and over and over until I finally finished. Tired and frustrated, I just went to bed. If I stayed up any longer, I would have blown up as someone for sure. One would expect that after a while of attempting something, it would get easier. Sadly, that wasn't the case. 2 weeks in, and it was only getting harder. I begged Mum to let me have just one small binge, but the most I would get was a little extra in my meals, or maybe a snack. Keeping myself from having an outburst was getting harder and harder each day. Mum could see that I was breaking and tried to get me to talk, but every time I did open up a little, it just made me feel worse. Why'd I have to be such a pig? Normal people didn't crave food like this. As usual, my dad was not helping. Constantly, he would point out my eating habits at the table or comment on how I looked either bigger or smaller. A weekend, he caught me going out for a walk with Mum in a dress and he blew up at me. Dealing with that without food to lean on was hell. Instead, I got to cry on Mum's shoulder about how nice a pie would be. Real mature of me, I know. I guess she was feeling a bit nice about that one, and the next day I actually got a slice of pie, albeit a small one, but I digress. September. Almost 3 weeks in, and I couldn't hold in my emotions anymore. I needed the food. I didn't care if I wasn't allowed to. I was getting my hands on it somehow. That meant all dignity was about to go out the window. Desperate and blinded by my need for food, I snuck around the house and looked for anything, and I mean anything, that I could get my hands on. From leftovers to food out in the bin, I didn't care. After collecting a good enough stash, I ran to my room and hid behind my bed to be the disgusting person I was. None of it had much of a taste because of how fast I was eating. Mum catching me in the act wasn't something I wanted to face, so I knew I had to get it down fast. Unfortunately, I wasn't fast enough. The woman was smarter than I thought and knew I was being too quiet. Minutes in, she was at my door with a very concerned look on her face. Oh dear. She sighed as she let herself in and slowly came over to me. I should have kept a better eye out, huh? Leave me alone, I hissed. Even I was surprised by the coldness in my voice. I know this is hard for you, Mum said quietly as she sat down beside me and rubbed my back. Showing no signs of wanting to take the food away, I kept shoveling it in. But this isn't going to help, is it? Surely some of this doesn't even taste good. No response. I just kept eating. All right, you. Mum held out her hand asking for the food. That's enough. We're going to clean this up and then talk. Whatever is bothering you needs to be discussed, and not with food. Please, can I just finish this? Mum sighed. You can finish the pastry. I'm putting the rest away. Does that sound better? I thought about it before nodding. A pastry was better than nothing. With a sigh, I pushed everything her way and she started cleaning up. Right as I was about to take another bite and actually try to enjoy the pastry, I heard some very angry footsteps start coming up the stairs. Oh no. I was in some serious trouble now. Scared, I looked at Mum, who had the same look of fear on her face. This wasn't good. The footsteps came up the stairs and stopped right at my room. Two eyes glared from behind, making me start to sweat. Eating my leftovers again, are we? He growled. Who knew the man would feel so strongly about them? Just couldn't help yourself? Mark, this isn't a good time, Mom tried to say. Unfortunately, it was too late. He saw the stash of food I had, including half of his leftovers. What the hell is this? He said in a very, very low, cold tone. He expected an answer, and he expected it now. I looked down at the pastry I had and fiddled with it nervously. There was a silence before Dad snapped, and I mean snapped. Without any warning, he stomped over to me, grabbed me by the collar of my dress, and lifted me up so our eyes met. I've had enough of you, boy! He screamed angrily in my face. The furiousness was showing clearly in his eyes, scaring the shit out of me. Fearing he would hurt me worse than before, I began to shake and tear up. First the cross-dressing, and now you want to be a spoiled brat and eat other people's food? Mark, please, Mum protested as she tried to intervene. It's not intentional. She didn't mean to do it. Stay out of this, and you only validate his stupid fantasies. He shoved her to the side and threw me to the ground. With a loud thud, I smashed into the wall, knocking over the nightstand that was next to me. I'm done with you. Clearly nothing I do seems to be able to save your sorry ass. So how about you give the streets a try? Wait, I started to say as tears flowed down my cheeks. Maybe if I could just convince him that I could do better. I could live as how he wanted me to until I moved out. If being thrown out onto the streets was the consequence for presenting as a woman, then I would just have to learn to ignore the feelings and live with them. I would try harder not to binge. Surely I could. Right? No, I'm done. Get your stuff and get the fuck out. Mark, Mum cried. If you're going to force her out, at least give her some time. A month and... If he doesn't leave now, then the mental asylum will have a new patient, Dad said very coldly. Your choice, boy. What will it be? Honey. Go. I sobbed while nodding. With all my remaining strength, I shakily got up and grabbed my dresses and shoved them into a bag. I was about to shove the precious blue one I had in there, but I didn't dare. Being on the streets would ruin it. I'll take this one, Mum said as she grabbed the blue one. It took me a second to realize that she had read my mind. Leaving my room behind meant Dad would probably trash it, so she was holding on to it for me. I do need a new dress. As much as I loved the dress and wanted to take it with me, I was glad it would be somewhere safe. Maybe in the future I would be able to come back for it. Hurry up, boy. Dad glared at me. I moved as fast as I could with my shaky body. Fumbling slowed me down, but Dad was always there to shove it into my bag for me. Without any hesitation, he started pushing me out of my room, ignoring my mother's crying in the back. He shoved me down the stairs and right out the door, slamming the door in my face. There wasn't even time to say goodbye, and I was officially alone. On the streets and alone. Chapter 11. Help. October. Being homeless was a struggle. Getting food was the biggest one. I had no money since Dad didn't give me any time to grab any. For the first couple days I starved. I supposed it was good for my weight. Not so great for my energy though. Constantly moving around and staying out of trouble is hard when you've got no energy. Trying desperately to survive, I attempted to get a job. Sadly, Beatrice ruined all my chances of that. Those little rumors she spread were my downfall, and now nobody would hire me. Most days I cowered in alleyways. I wasn't about to be seen or found. Truth be told, I hoped I would just peacefully pass away. Life was too hard. First the gender issues, then the binging, and now homelessness. What else could go wrong? No, wait, cold. Of course, the cold and rainy weather was setting back in. Perfect. Just what I needed. One really cold day, I was trying to warm myself up by walking around the local park that Mom and I used to go to. Sitting around on concrete wasn't helping with the cold, so I figured some activity would help at least a bit. It was actually beginning to help a bit. Other than my hands that were like ice, the rest of my body was starting to warm up. To try and warm up my hands too, I tucked them under my armpits for warmth as I walked. After a couple of laps, I finally warmed up enough to sit down on one of the nearby benches and save some energy. With the lack of food, I had to be careful with how much I walked. Quietly, I curled up on the bench and did my best to keep the heat. It was quite nice to not be sitting on the cold cement and freezing cold for once, a luxury that I haven't felt in a while. As I enjoyed the heat, someone joined me on the bench. At first, I showed no interest. Somehow, though, I felt as if they were staring at me. Most people felt the need to stare at homeless people, but this stare was different. I couldn't explain it, but it just was. Curiously, I glanced over at who it was, and it was my mother. My heart nearly skipped a beat, and it looked like hers nearly did the same. "Mom? Adam!" she cried as she pulled me into a hug. "Oh my God, I thought it was you, but I wasn't sure. You're okay." Well, I was still in shock. "Oh my gosh, I've missed you. Are you okay? Oh, nobody's hurt you, have they?" I'm okay." I nodded a bit. "It's just a struggle, I guess." "Well, no doubt. Your dad shoved you out without any notice at all," Mom said. "He didn't even give you time to grab money." Yeah. "I'm really happy you're okay. I can't say it enough." Mom smiled sadly as she cupped my cheek. "I wish I could bring you back home, but I can't." It's okay," I sighed. "I can figure things out." "I'll be here to help. Whatever you need, I'll help with. Actually, on that note, I have some spare money that I carry with me just in case. Here, take it." "Oh no, Mom, I couldn't take it." Mom pulled it out of her pocket and placed it in my hand. Before I could give it back, she pushed my hand towards me. "Get yourself some food. You look really sickly." I sighed as I placed it in my pocket. This was a fight I couldn't win. "Thanks, Mom." "No problem, dear," Mom smiled. For the next hour or so, Mom and I talked. Reluctantly, I told her about the past couple weeks and how hellish they were. Hearing it only made her more determined to help. Dad absolutely did not want me home, but that couldn't stop Mom from helping. From that day forth, we started meeting every week so she could check up on me and give me anything I needed, whether it be money, clothes, or food. At first, things began to look up, but of course, things can never stay the same with me, and once more, I fell back into binging. All my money went towards food. I would lie to Mom and tell her that I spent it on other things. Whenever I could, I would gorge on food. It was extreme enough that, once more, I started packing on the weight. That was when Mom got suspicious and I finally had to admit to my lies. Was she happy about it? Of course not, but she was willing to help however she could. Unfortunately, there wasn't much she could do. If I didn't have money, I would steal. Thank God I never got caught for it, because that would have worried Mom so much. I was already giving the poor woman white hair. At the rate I was stressing her out, she was going to have a whole head of white hair by next month. The cycle kept repeating. Binge, cry, hate me, try to stop, fail, repeat. Mom tried everything she could, but I was unstoppable. If she could have been there 24/7, I knew she would have been, but the reality was she couldn't be. Dad would have gotten way too suspicious. He didn't know that we were meeting up, and we planned to keep it that way, so Mom had to be careful. Chapter 12. Good Changes. January. The day labeled as the stormiest day of the year arrived. Where was I? Outside. Finding shelter was practically impossible. All the nice places were already taken. That left me stuck in an alleyway with little to no shelter. After the prior night's binge, my stomach ached horribly, making it hard to move around. Not only that, but I really didn't want to go around showing how bloated I was. Cold and wet, I remained in the alleyway. I prayed that the rain would end. Maybe, just maybe, someone above would give me a miracle. One good thing in my life. Pretty sad when that one good thing is the lack of rain. Sadly, the rain wasn't letting up. I was just going to have to deal with it. I buried my head in my arms and curled up even more. Curling up made me feel a bit more comfortable. I liked the idea of appearing smaller. How small could I make myself? Maybe I could shrink away if I curled up tight enough. I was about to try when I heard someone walk near me. It was most likely a passerby, so I wouldn't move. However, they stopped right in front of me. Ah, yes, just what I needed. Someone probably wanted to rob me. Hey! Odd. Why would they start a robbery with a casual hey? Confused, I looked up. Being as cold and tired as I was, I probably looked pretty dead on the inside. I could just feel the lifelessness in my eyes. To my surprise, a young black man stood in front of me. The voice was a bit off where it was higher than I expected, but he looked gentle and kind, even smiling a bit. Hey, I said with a confused look. What did he want from me? He must be cold. Yeah, I admitted quietly. If you'd like, I'd be happy to offer my place tonight, from one woman to another. Huh? What did he... Then I realized on closer look, he was a she, just dressed as a man. It explained the higher voice too, most likely to get around town easier. Being a black woman walking around town was not a good idea. Here, let's get you somewhere warm and dry. She reached out and pulled me up. Going to strangers' houses wasn't the best of ideas, but honestly I was desperate. I just wanted to have a day off from the cold streets, so I went with her. The whole walk was fairly quiet, not that I wanted to speak anyway. If she thought I was a woman, then speaking would ruin all my chances of getting a shelter. We headed back to her place, which was a fairly large house. She seemed to be quite well off. Either she married into a rich family or she was a maid. When we got in, I discovered she had married none other than Reginald. Was this the woman he talked about who liked winter mints? What was her name again? Oh, I can't remember. That's quite the storm, huh? Max laughed as she pulled at her soaking wet clothing a bit. I simply nodded a bit, not wanting to give myself away. Let me go get dressed and I'll grab you something dry to wear. The woman hurried upstairs and changed quickly. Within record time, she came out in a light blue dress that had paint stains on the front. It was a complete transformation. She had gone from looking like a man to looking like a beautiful young woman. Her dark brown hair went past her shoulders and had slight waves in it. Unlike me, she had a beautiful and curvy figure. Big bust, big hips, the perfect hourglass figure that I wish I had. I was handed a dress to change into, which I quickly did. There was no way I was standing around in soaking wet clothing for much longer. Being in a not only warm but also dry dress was like heaven. I didn't even care that the dress had paint stains on it. Best feeling ever. Is it warm? The woman asked as I stepped out in the hallway with her dress on. I nodded. Awfully quiet, aren't you? She chuckled. What's your name? Oh God. Telling her my name was Adam was like asking to be labeled male. Unfortunately, changing it was never something I was able to do. Dad would have killed me if he caught Mom calling me something else. So even though I hated the name, I never said anything about it. I'm Max, she said with high hopes I would greet myself. I was right, and she was Reginald's wife who loved winter mints. I didn't give her the response she wanted though, and went even quieter. What, do you not know your own name? I don't like it, I mumbled, careful not to speak loud enough that she would be able to hear the deeper tone in my voice. I'm sure it's a lovely name. Ever so quietly, I mumbled it out. Sorry? Come again? I sighed and spoke louder this time. Adam. The look on her face said it all. At first it was a surprise, then a realization. I could almost see the gears turning in her head. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. She started freaking out, thinking I would be insulted that I was just given a dress. I thought you were a woman. I can get you something else to wear. I'm so sorry I handed you a dress. I genuinely didn't know. No, it's okay. I was too far into this and just didn't want to go back to being forced to live as a man. And for some reason it just felt comfortable opening up to her. I explained everything the best I could do to her, trying to reassure her that I liked to present as a woman as I felt that I was one. Her reaction surprised me. Instead of getting upset, she was understanding. Although she didn't understand how I felt, she went with it and said she would refer to me as a woman, which made me incredibly happy. Now, there's just one other issue, she said. Oh no. What was the issue? Was that all a lie? Panic set in as I started to freak out at what the hell the issue was. From the seriousness on her face, I felt as though the next moment I was going to be kicked out. As she opened her mouth, I braced myself for what was to come next. Avon? Yeah, I quite like it. Well, I would say that's pretty gentle of her to help you find a better name that fits, Mum smiled. She's right. It does suit you better than Adam. Yeah, it does. And here I thought her issue would be me as a whole, not that my name doesn't fit. Oh, you worry too much, Mum giggled as she playfully shoved me. We were back in our usual meeting spot, and I had just told her about everything that had happened, which was a lot. I'm really happy that Max is letting you stay with her, though. It's good to know you're in a safe place. Yeah, I smiled. I think the only issue is going to be Beatrice, since she's Reginald's sister. But other than that, I'm happy to live with them. Max has even been helping me with the binge eating. I bet. It must be nice to be in a household that fully accepts you for who you are and is helping to get you through your issues. I do wish I could have given that to you, but it is what it is. You gave me everything I wanted and more. I gave Mum a smile. Even if Dad doesn't like it, you stood up for me and were always there to help. Even now you are. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Mum got a little teary-eyed hearing that and smiled. Not knowing what to say, she pulled me into a hug. I'm so lucky to have a daughter like you, she said softly. Now that you got a home, I think it's safe to say I ought to return that dress to you, huh? The blue one? Mm-hmm. How about you keep it? As much as it hurt to say that, I felt like you'd be better with Mum. That way you always have a piece of me with you. You're sure? You love that dress, though. I'm sure, I nodded. I know it's not much since I can't be with you all the time anymore, but it's the best I can do. I promise I'll take good care of it then, Mum said as she hugged me tighter. If this woman hugged me any tighter, I was going to lose my ability to breathe. I love you, Mum, I partially croaked out. Even if it was too tight of a hug, I still freaking enjoyed it. I love you too, Avon. Chapter 13. Aftermath. 30 years later. 30 years had passed since that moment. Now, I know what you're thinking. Where am I now? What am I doing? Funnily enough, I'm not even alive. I died about a little less than a year after moving in with Max. Wasn't the prettiest of deaths either. Let me just give a quick rundown. Bear with me here, it's a lot. Living with Max and Reginald was the best thing to ever happen to me. Reginald saw me as a daughter and even found me a partner who accepted me, who would later become my fiancé. Unfortunately, Max passed a couple of months before I did, after her husband pushed her down the stairs. This was partially Beatrice's fault because she had told him about Max's apparent cheating, knowing he would hurt her out of anger. He didn't actually mean to kill her, but what happened, happened. The funeral was held a little while after, which of course, Beatrice had to ruin. The snake of a woman stomped in there and berated Max for being a black woman who should have never been able to marry into the family. When the family stood up for Max, Beatrice put her attention on me. Me presenting as a woman was something she could not stand in the slightest. Determined to get everyone on her side, she actually tried to get Fluffy to flip my skirt and flash everyone. However, it seemed her snake had more brains than she did and refused to do it. But the whole moment still really upset me. What do I do after getting upset? Not go to my fiancé. Not go to Reginald. No. I went to food. Duh. Both my fiancé and Reginald tried to keep an eye on me, but they looked away for a bit too long and I found myself binging once again. In order to hide that I had done it, I tried to go to dinner like a normal human. Unfortunately, that little bit of extra food was enough to rupture my stomach lining. I don't remember much after that, except for the pain and being rushed to the hospital. Obviously, I didn't make it. So, why am I still here, you ask? Shortly after passing away, I woke up in the place we call the afterlife, which is run by Max and a few of her old lab buddies. A place where there's a council in charge of groups of representatives who represent the voices of mental illnesses in people's heads, similar to the one that constantly told me to binge. Like Max, I was a part of this council. You can only guess what I was in charge of. Binge eating disorder and also dysphoria. At first, I didn't know what the second one meant. But later I found out that it was the gender-related stress I had been feeling my whole life. I finally had a label for what I was. Transgender. Sadly, the council believed I was too sensitive to start working as a member. Instead, I got to stay with Max and learn to deal with my binge eating and also a new addition to my problems, mind reading. Everyone developed some sort of magical ability, but mine was the worst. Thankfully, I did get control of it over time and learned to switch it on and off. But when it all first started, overwhelming would be an understatement. Eventually Rex, the boss for anorexia, ended up being out of commission for the foreseeable future, and I took over for him for nearly 20 years until his best friend joined the council. From there, I was able to start working as the council member I was meant to be. I got my own group of representatives and things got up and running. I believe that sums everything up. Now things are much better. Yeah, binging is still a very big issue for me, and occasionally I will binge bad enough that I end up rupturing my stomach lining again, and need a trip to the hospital, but it could be worse. However, there is one thing I worried about a lot. More so lately than in the past. What happened to Mum? I couldn't help but wonder if she was okay, or if she even knew I was dead. As the afterlife was connected to heaven and hell, Max and I recently started visiting Reginald in heaven since he recently passed. According to him, he told my mother about my death, but I did worry if it was true or not. There was the possibility he was only saying it to keep me calm. Over time, I worried more and more about it. It wasn't helping that I knew her time was coming. Soon she would be gone from the living world, which allowed me to see her again. I just didn't know when I would be able to. One boring day, I decided to take a trip down to Lucas's office to see if he had any information on my mother. With him being in control of the whole afterlife, he had all the papers of who died, even if they were in one of the other two worlds. Meaning, he would know if my mom was gone or not. Sir? I cracked open the door to his office a bit. May I come in? This is about your mother, isn't it? He said flatly. Never in my life have I met someone so flat. I doubted the man ever knew what emotions were. Yeah, have you seen anything about her? Last name's Murphy, correct? Yes, sir. She's in heaven. Just got there the other day. Would you like me to send a visit request? My eyes lit up. Oh, yes, please. Thank you so much. Not reading my expression, he simply nodded and returned to his paperwork. Now all I had to do was wait. I wish I could have visited right then and there, but sadly, visit requests were needed so people didn't travel from place to place and try to hide there. 2 days later, I was at the Golden Gates. An angel was there to greet me and lead the way. I could barely contain my excitement. I couldn't explain how much I wanted to see my mother. Like the afterlife, heaven was built like the living world, just more majestic. Everything was bright, and people walked and traveled by clouds. It always made me wonder how they didn't fall, though. I was led to a quaint-looking house on the edge of the street. This is it? The angel smiled. I'll be back for you when your time's up. Have fun. With that, she disappeared. I took a deep breath, let it out, and knocked. Silence. Nervously, I waited for someone to answer. What if I got the wrong house? Maybe Lucas got the wrong person. What if she wasn't even home? Hello? The door opened, and I heard a voice that I hadn't heard in years. But not the one I was expecting. Instead of my mother, it was my father, who looked much older and exhausted. One look at me, and he looked very puzzled. Adam? Avon, actually, I mumbled. I changed my name. He froze for a moment before looking apologetic. Oh, right. Sorry. It's just... It's been so long since I've seen you. I guess it was an automatic response. Why don't you come in? Your mother will be very happy to see you. Hesitantly, I let myself in. A huge part of me still feared my dad, even though he looked so much gentler now. The very first thing I noticed when I entered the house was the wintry blue dress that I'd loved all those years ago. I froze when I saw it hanging on the nearby closet door. She really kept it all this time? If it wasn't for Dad giving me an impatient look, I would have stared at it a while longer. Not wanting to cause a fight so soon, I tore my eyes away and followed him. He walked with me down the hallway into the small living room where Mum was sitting on the couch. Like Dad, she looked much older. White hair replaced the once reddish-brown hair, and she had the stereotypical wrinkled look. We locked eyes, and both of us took a moment before running towards each other. Well, I did. Mum wasn't able to get up fast enough. Mum, oh God, I missed you so much, I cried. I'm so sorry I wasn't able to say goodbye. I still think of it to this day. Oh, Avon, don't worry about that. Mum hugged me tightly. The feeling of being in her arms again was indescribable. Reginald told me what happened after you passed. Although it was upsetting, I knew you were in a better place. You were too good for that world. I still feel bad, I sniffed. Don't, okay? We're reunited again, so that's all that matters. With my best smile and nod, I pulled back and wiped tears out of my eyes. As I sat down next to her, Dad joined us in the chair next to me. Like normal, he looked like he had something to say. I braced myself for the worst. The chances of him changing were so small that it wasn't even worth hoping for. So I heard you got yourself a fiancé, Dad said pretty bluntly. Clearly, it wasn't what he wanted to say. I met with the man after Reginald told your mother everything. Very sweet guy. Yeah, he is, I nodded. I figure we will still be good friends when his time comes. Relationships aren't something easy to do when it's between worlds like this. I don't doubt it, he nodded. Awkward silence. Mum gave him a look before rolling her eyes. Come on, Mark, she exclaimed. Be a man and say what you've got to say. Dad gave her a look before looking at me with a very apologetic expression. Avon, I'm sorry for how I treated you. I was a terrible father to you. I was shocked. Dad was apologizing? As a true Canadian would say, eh? I knew you were happier presenting as a woman deep down, but I could never accept it. I had all these dreams of you being the perfect son, and I failed to see I had a perfect daughter. I caused you more harm than good. I blame myself for the binge-eating habits you picked up on, and I hope you can forgive me. I forgive you, I said after taking a moment to process it all. The look on Dad's face said it all. All those years of blaming himself were over. He finally had his daughter back. "Thank you," Dad nodded, clearly trying to be a man and not cry. Once again, awkward silence. "So, tell us what's been going on," Mum said after a while of silence. "What have you been up to?" With a smile, I told them everything. Not one detail was missing. We talked right up until I had to leave. Even then, I had more stories to tell for our next meetup. At any chance I could, I would visit them. Family time was something I didn't get a lot of as a kid, so this was finally the time to enjoy it. And enjoy it I did. Not as their son, of course, but as their proud daughter. The end.